Have you ever thought about what really happens when you hit the brakes?
No.
Whether it's avoiding a runaway shopping cart or just flexing those smooth driving skills, your car's braking system is the unsung hero of the ride.
Joseph! You walking faster?
Imagine that you're cruising down the road and suddenly you need to stop. You press the pedal and like magic, your car slows down or stops.
Oh my God!
But what's really happening under the hood? When you press that pedal, you're sending a force through a system of fluids or electronics that clamp down on your wheels, creating friction and bringing you to a smooth halt. That's just the basics, but don't worry.
Okay.
Let's start with the hydraulic braking system, your car's trusty sidekick.
Yeah, boy.
This system runs on brake fluid, cylinders, and some serious friction magic. When you hit the brake pedal, it creates pressure that sends glycol ethers or diethylene glycol rushing to the brake pads, stopping the wheels in their tracks. Here's how it works. You press the pedal, and the force gets multiplied and sent to all four wheels through a system filled with brake fluid. The whole thing relies on two main parts, the master cylinder and the wheel cylinders. The master cylinder, which is like the quarterback, is connected by tubes to the wheel cylinders at each wheel. The wheel cylinders are like the wide receivers, catching the fluid pressure and turning it into stopping power.
From behind, she's ready to do the hit. The whistles are being...
When you're not braking, the system is just hanging out, filled with fluid under light pressure. Now, why are hydraulic brakes so awesome?
Why?
Well, they give equal braking power to all four wheels, reducing wear and tear since there are no clunky joints like in mechanical brakes, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. And you can easily adjust the braking force by changing the size of the pistons and cylinders. But they're not perfect. Even a tiny bit of air leaking into the system can throw everything off. And if the brake fluid leaks, it can damage the brake shoes. So, while hydraulic brakes are super efficient and reliable, you've got to keep an eye out for leaks to keep them working smoothly. But how about a braking system where you don't need to keep an eye for leaks to keep them working? Yes, we have the regenerative braking systems. Imagine you're slowing down, but instead of wasting all that energy as heat, like the mechanical braking system, which we'll talk about in a bit, regenerative brakes are busy turning that energy into a power-up for your car.
I'm a superhero!
It's like hitting a mushroom in Super Mario, except instead of growing larger, your car just gets even more efficient. Here's what happens. When you hit the brakes, the electric motor starts running backwards like it's in reverse gear. It acts like a generator, capturing the energy that would normally just vanish into thin air and feeding it back into the battery or capacitors. Since regenerative brakes need an electric vehicle setup, you'll mostly find them on hybrids and electric cars. They're installed in the drivetrain or on the wheels and use magnetic fields or mechanical torque to slow the car down while making energy instead of just heating things up. So, what's in it for you? Well, regenerative brakes help keep that battery pack topped up, so you're not just burning fuel if you're driving a hybrid. It's like having a magic pocket where you stash away energy for later. And because regenerative braking does a lot of the heavy lifting, your brake pads and rotors get a much needed break. Regenerative braking systems have their own downsides. When you're cruising at lower speeds, your car has less kinetic energy to work with. It's like trying to squeeze every last drop out of a nearly empty ketchup bottle. So, you might find yourself pressing a bit harder on the pedal to get the same braking punch. Let's quickly hit the brakes now, before we continue our journey. Kindly hit the subscribe button. Now let's move on to the next braking system, the electromagnetic braking system. Electromagnetic braking systems are the high-tech wizards you'll find in many modern and hybrid vehicles. These brakes use the magic of electromagnetism to stop your car without any friction. That's right, no friction means less wear and tear, longer lasting brakes, and way less maintenance. Sounds like a dream, right? Well, here's the cool part. Electromagnetic brakes work by applying electronic and magnetic power. When a magnetic flux is sent in a direction perpendicular to the wheel's rotation, it creates a rapid current flowing in an opposite direction. This opposing force slows down the wheel, giving you smooth, frictionless braking. Think of it like a magician using a magic wand to counteract the wheel's spin. One of the big reasons these brakes are becoming popular is that they need almost no maintenance. No more replacing brake shoes or dealing with messy oiling. Plus, they're less likely to slip when compared to traditional brakes, thanks to the quick response of the magnetic system. And because there's no need for lubrication, they're perfect for hybrid vehicles. You'll mostly see these brakes in trams and trains, but they're making their way into cars too. The benefits are huge. They're fast, cheap, and almost maintenance-free. They can handle higher speeds and heavier loads, and they even save a bit of energy, reducing your running costs. And unlike mechanical brakes, they generate hardly any heat, so there's no risk of brake failure from overheating. So with electromagnetic braking, you get a super efficient, reliable, and low maintenance system that's perfect for the future of driving.
Oh my God! Wow!
Now, let's talk about mechanical braking systems. The old school champs powering your handbrake or emergency brake. Think of them as the granddaddies of car brakes, using straightforward mechanics to get the job done. Here's how it works. When you press the brake pedal, the force gets carried to the brake drum or disc rotor through various mechanical linkages like rods, fulcrums, and springs. Simple, right?
It's so simple.
Well, let's look at the full principle. In a motor vehicle, each wheel is connected to a drum, which has brake shoes that press against it to stop the car. Most designs use 2 brake shoes per drum, creating a complete brake mechanism at each wheel. These brake shoes have brake linings on their outer surfaces. One end of each brake shoe is anchored, and the other end moves to expand the shoe and press it against the brake drum when you brake. When you're not braking, a spring holds the brake shoes in place. The drum keeps the whole setup safe from dust and moisture. Mechanical brakes were the go-to in older cars, but they've become a bit of a relic. They're simpler and less prone to failure since fewer parts mean fewer things that can go wrong. They're also cheaper to make and easier to maintain. But here's the catch. They're not as effective as hydraulic braking systems, but they still hold a special place, especially when you yank the handbrake in a tight spot.
Oh, yeah.
Alright, now that we've got a grip on the basics and kinds of braking systems, let's talk about the types of brakes you'll find under these systems. First up, we've got the superstar of modern braking, disc brakes. Most cars on the road today rely on disc brakes, and it's easy to see why they're super effective. Some manufacturers still use drum brakes, which we'll talk about next, but they just can't compete with the stopping power of discs.
Look at me. Sure. I'm the captain now.
So, what exactly are disc brakes? Think of them like a pair of vice grips clamping down on a spinning bike wheel. When you hit the brake pedal, calipers squeeze pairs of brake pads against a disc, creating friction that slows down your car. Simple, right? The whole setup includes a disc/rotor, a brake caliper, and brake pads. When you press the brake pedal, brake fluid creates pressure, squeezing the brake pads against the rotor. This friction slows down the wheels, and ultimately, your car. Disc brakes are usually made of cast iron. These are attached to the wheel or axle. To stop the wheel, the friction material on the brake pads is pressed against both sides of the disc, creating the necessary friction to slow down or stop the vehicle. There are 2 main types of disc brakes, hydraulic and mechanical. Hydraulic disc brakes use brake fluid to bring your car to a stop. When you press the brake pedal, the fluid moves through the brake line to the caliper, creating pressure that pushes the pistons in the caliper against the brake disc. This allows you to slow down in a very controlled manner, and they work great in all weather conditions. Mechanical disc brakes, on the other hand, use an inner and outer cable. When you press the brake lever, these cables tighten, putting pressure on the brake pads. No brake fluid here, just good old-fashioned cable action. So, what are the advantages of using disc brakes? Disc brakes, especially the hydraulic disc brakes, are the superheroes of the braking world. Thanks to some pretty smart tech, these brakes offer the best performance you can get. Whether you're dealing with rain, mud, or just a regular dry day, hydraulic disc brakes stay consistent. They use brake fluid, which means even a light press on the pedal gives you solid, reliable braking, and they last longer than other types of brakes. The combination of brake fluid and high-quality brake pads makes them super durable. Plus, replacing them is cheaper in the long run, unlike other kinds of brakes, which wear down your rims over time and force you to buy a whole new wheel set. Disc brakes only need the occasional new pad. Now, as awesome as they are, hydraulic disc brakes do have a few drawbacks.
No, God!
They're more difficult to maintain than other kinds of brakes. You've got to keep the brake fluid topped up and make sure the disc is free of oil and grease. It's a bit more work, but your local shop can help you keep things running smoothly. Another thing to keep in mind is that they're a bit more expensive, but the trade-off is worth it for the improved performance. Over to the mechanical disc brakes, these are the simpler and cheaper options when compared to the hydraulic cousins. The downside? They don't have as much stopping power, especially in wet weather. But the upside is they're easier to install and maintain, making them a good choice if you want something straightforward and budget-friendly. Now, let's hold the brake here and check out the drum brakes. A drum brake is a traditional brake in which friction is caused by a set of shoes or pads that press against a rotating drum-shaped part called a brake drum. Unlike the disc brakes, fluids are not used directly in drum brakes. Disc brakes use hydraulic fluid to push the brake pads directly into a spinning disc, while drum brakes use hydraulic fluid to push wheel cylinders that spread the brake shoes against the drum. Here's how it works. When you hit the brakes, brake fluid from the master cylinder is forced under pressure into the wheel cylinder. This pushes the brake shoe into contact with the inside of the drum. The friction from the rubbing action slows down the rotation of the drum, and since the drum is attached to the wheel, your vehicle slows down too. When you release the brakes, return springs pull the shoes back to their resting position and you're ready to roll again. You'll often find drum brakes on the rear wheels of vehicles because most of the stopping force is handled by the front brakes. This means less heat is generated in the rear, making drum brakes a good fit there. Plus, they make it easy to incorporate a parking brake. Drum brakes are used in most heavy-duty trucks, buses, some medium and light-duty trucks, and a few cars, dirt bikes, ATVs, and a few smaller recreational vehicles like electric scooters. Now, let's talk advantages. Drum brakes are cheaper to produce and tend to need maintenance less frequently due to their better corrosion resistance when compared to disc brakes. They also have a built-in self-energizing effect, which means they require less input force like hydraulic pressure to work. Drum brakes do come with their own set of challenges, however. They're more complex than disc brakes, so you need a good understanding of how they work and follow several steps to reassemble them correctly. This complexity makes maintaining drum brakes more time-consuming, and the greater number of parts means more potential failure points. Springs, for instance, can break from fatigue if they're not replaced along with worn brake shoes. So, while drum brakes are sturdy and reliable, they require a bit more know-how to maintain. If you're up for the challenge though, they're a solid choice, especially for heavy-duty vehicles. Let's look at a couple of other brakes that aren't exactly types of brakes, but are definitely worth mentioning. These guys play some pretty important roles in keeping you safe and sound on the road. First is anti-lock brakes. Anti-lock brakes are a super cool technology integrated into the braking system to stop your car's brakes from locking up. Imagine you're driving and suddenly need to slam on the brakes. Without anti-lock brakes, your wheels would lock up, sending you into an uncontrolled skid, especially in wet conditions. But with anti-lock brakes, sensors on each wheel keep an eye on their rotational speed. With anti-lock brakes, it's like having a skilled dance partner guiding you smoothly through a tricky move, ensuring you stay in control and don't lose your footing. If one wheel starts to lock up, the anti-lock brakes send pulses of brake pressure to that wheel. The big advantage of anti-lock brakes is that it improves vehicle stability and steering control during braking, especially on slippery surfaces. It also helps prevent skidding by keeping your wheels from locking up. However, anti-lock brakes can be a bit pricey to repair and maintain. Next is the emergency brake, or you can call it the parking brake. This brake is your car's safety net. It's connected to the main brakes via a cable and can be activated by a hand lever, foot pedal, or even a button. You typically use this brake to keep your car in place, especially if you're parked on a hill. But it's also there as a last resort backup if your main brakes ever fail. If you learned anything in this video, definitely check out our playlist on every car part explained. Trust me, you'll love them. I'll see you over there.